The law matters, and it helps when you have an understanding of the law. Welcome, I'm Debbie Moraes, your host and moderator. This program is dedicated to making legal topics and information accessible to you. We offer clear legal information, insights, and real-life examples to help you navigate the complexities of the law. A solid understanding of the law empowers you to protect yourself, your family, and your business. As a result of our conversations, our discussions here, you may find that you're able to handle some legal issues yourself. Great. However, if you need additional outside counsel, you'll be better prepared, and so will the counsel you select. As always, our goal is to save you time, money, and of course, we want you to achieve the best possible results. To my far left, we want to welcome again and thank Attorney David Bizarre from the Bizarre & Associates law firm in East Providence, who continues to weigh in on the topics we cover. And together, David and I would like to welcome and thank Attorney Deborah Gonzalez for joining us. She is a clinical professor of immigration at Roger Williams University Law School, and she's also a municipal court judge in Central Falls. Welcome. Thank you. She's an ideal guest to weigh in on the topics that we're going to cover today. So we're very aware of so many hopefuls coming across our borders. It's difficult. But then the journey through the legal pathways to safety and to a promising future, that continues to be fraught as well. So in just a snapshot of the hot topics, and there are many in immigration, we have policy changes, legal battles, economic and humanitarian impacts. We have discussions, as they say, or public discourse, events, so many things going on, not the least of which is LA and their protests and unrest. So we have a lot to discuss, and we're glad that we have our legal experts, including a teacher, to help break this all down. So, where are we now? Let's do a little bit of a primer, so to speak. Help us understand the legal landscape now so that people can navigate the U.S. immigration system. Deb, you want to start with helping us a bit?
Yes, so our Immigration Nationality Act is pretty old. The last time that the act had actually been revamped completely was in 1990. There was amendments that were made in 1995, 96, and then there were amendments again, a few in 1998. And then since then, we have not had any amendments at all. So when we hear about immigration needing some reform, it's because the laws that we have now are really old. And they no longer fit within the scheme of how immigrants immigrate to the United States. And so we need Congress to be thinking about different ways in which we may be able to provide relief to our neighboring countries and then other countries that need immigration help or need help with their population so that maybe their countries are more successful and people are not looking to come to the United States.
Well, there are legitimate reasons for people to come. Let's quickly address some of the reasons that people come here.
I mean, the majority of the people that I think come to the United States are coming for two reasons. One is an economic reason, right? We
Sure.
think about the American dream. All of us have it. My parents had it. And so we think about having a good job and making enough money so people could live and having health insurance and being able to see a doctor. And having laws that are obeyed, right? Many countries, laws are not obeyed, which then leads to either civil unrest, war, or to entities which commit crimes. So thinking about organized crime, gangs, for example, we hear a lot about that on the news, particularly in the Northern Triangle, right? Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras, where gangs like MS-13 and 18th Street are sort of taking over these countries. Now we're hearing about Venezuela, and we're hearing about Nicaragua and all these countries where there's political unrest and people don't feel safe. And so they're being persecuted for one reason or another, and so they come to the United States for those reasons.
So people talk about asylum and refugee status. What's the difference, and what are the changes in the status?
Well, as it relates to refugees first, so refugees are people who are living outside of their country, in another country, and are seeking refuge to a country. It doesn't necessarily have to be the United States, and they're applying through United Nations. So the United Nations is involved, the application goes through United Nations. United Nations then decides what country the person will relocate to, because the United States is not the only country that takes in refugees. If the United States is the place where the United Nations has decided, okay, this person is going to the United States because there is a community there. Generally, United Nations is looking for, is there a community in the country that they're going to go to? Then it depends on whatever process is for that country. For the United States, it's a 12-step process for refugees. It is a very long process. In the meantime, the person is living in this country that is not theirs, usually in a refugee camp of some sort, and they're there until the migration can be made to the country that has been chosen. Asylum seekers are people who are either inside the United States or at our border, and it does not have to be a port of entry. I want to make that clear, because this administration seems to say that you can't apply for asylum unless you're at a port of entry. Our statute does not say that. It says that if you are anywhere within or at our border or within our border and you're saying, I am afraid to go back to my home country, then our government, under our laws, is supposed to let the person come in the United States and apply for asylum in front of an immigration judge or an asylum officer, depending on what happened at the border with the person.
So David, once someone is in this situation, how does the legal system in our country, if say they're going to be wanting to come to the United States, how do they go through the legal system? Do they get to call a friend who knows a David Bazaar or somebody else who's in the profession? How does that work, David?
Well, if they phone a friend and I'm the friend, I'm going to tell them to call Debbie. So
referral, sure.
yeah. So,
but
the process generally is when they come in, I assume that they seek their asylum at the border and then they're given a release or whatever?
They are. I mean, generally speaking, when people are, so we'll speak about the people that are coming in the border because that seems to be more in the media today. So people will come in the border, and generally speaking, people will either surrender to ICE, so Immigration Customs Enforcement, or CBP, Custom Border Patrol, Custom Border Protection. And they'll say, I'm afraid to go back to my home country. One of two things could happen. Well, they are supposed to get what is called a credible fear interview. So a credible fear interview is just them appearing before an asylum officer. And the asylum officer takes some information to determine whether or not what this person is saying is credible. So does the officer believe what this person is saying? If the officer says, yes, I believe what you're saying to be true, they then can release the person. They have the authority, the discretion to release the person and allow the person to come into the United States, hire a lawyer, because immigration, unlike criminal law, is not free. So, the immigrant has to either hire a lawyer or find an organization that does work pro bono for free, like my immigration clinic. That's what we do. Get someone to help them go through the asylum process. So as it relates to getting a lawyer, they really either need to know a David Bazaar who will know a Debbie Gonzalez. They are also given a list of pro bono lawyers. Most of us who do this work are pretty tapped with caseload.
And I imagine that's only continuing.
It's been
each and every month.
It's been quite challenging. You get constant calls, and for those of us who are really passionate about this work, it's hard to say no.
Sure.
But,
You know what's been of concern is these are folks that are doing it the right way, theoretically going through a process.
Right.
And I've heard, and I don't know if you can comment on it or not, that some people are being picked up after they've been called to come in for a hearing? How is that?
So that has been really problematic, and I think it's something that this administration has been doing. So I'm a defense lawyer, so I tend to have that defense hat on, and I think that's being done in bad faith. So what has been happening now, and this is a bit technical, so here's my immigration lesson for the day. When people come into the border, they are considered, and this is a legal term, an arriving alien. It means that the person has come to the United States, they're seeking admission, seeking to come into the United States, but they don't have the proper documents to do that. And so as an arriving alien under the law, an arriving alien can be detained, and in fact the statute says must be detained until one of two things happen. Either they're given a credible fear interview that has been approved and then they can be released, or they're going to be deported under what's called expedited removal. So we've been hearing a lot about
that.
A lot about expedited removal. What has been happening under this administration, which in my opinion is a complete violation of due process, is person came in at the border, they claimed fear, had their credible fear interview, was granted their credible fear interview, which just means we're allowing you into the United States to apply for asylum. Person is released, they're going to court, they're doing all the right things, and now the person goes to court, what is called a master calendar hearing. Think of it as a pre-trial hearing in a criminal case, if you will. Government attorney, Department of Homeland Security attorney, will say, Your Honor, we would like to terminate these proceedings, meaning end the deportation proceedings, because we no longer have an interest in this foreign national, which is what I call them. The foreign national then thinks, wonderful, my deportation proceedings have terminated. I am now going to apply for asylum affirmatively with the United States Citizenship Immigration Service, which they would have a right to do. And instead, ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement, is outside of the courthouse picking people up and saying, you are an arriving alien, we are going to detain you, and now we're deporting you.
And that's been in the headline, that's been in the news, and it's a deterrent, as we might say, to someone's complying, wants to do it the right way, and yet this is a problem.
It's a deterrent to people going to court.
So you mentioned due process.
That's what I was going to ask you about, David.
I was with some folks the other day, and they asked me, does due process only apply to U.S. citizens, or does it apply to others? And I told them, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that both the Fifth Amendment and the 14th Amendment say person. And person to me is defined as anybody who is within the border of the United States is entitled to due process.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right, and good job.
Thank you.
Professor Bazar. Yes, any person who is within our borders is entitled to due process under the 14th Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, right to not to incriminate oneself, and the Fourth Amendment, the right to be free of search and seizure. Right? So whether or not that person is documented. So it could be the foreign national that was at the border, does not go through CBP, isn't caught at all, sneaks in and is now here. That person under our Constitution is protected. Who is not protected? And I want to be clear, because I was recently on another news media, and I want to just be clear that there's no confusion. An airport is a border. So, Logan Airport in Boston, JFK in
New York.
In New York, our airport in Rhode Island. Oh my God!
TF Green.
Thank you. TF. All these initials have me confused. TF Green. All of those are international airports, and they are borders in themselves. So when a person says, well, I'm at an airport and you go, right, we all have to go through customs, even US citizens. We are at a border when we are meeting with that officer. People might say, but isn't that already in New York and isn't that in Miami or whatever? Yes, it is, but foreign nationals who find themselves at the border are always going to be subject to admission into the United States, not lawful permanent residents, but foreign nationals. And due process rights for those people don't apply.
There's a difference, as I understand it, in those who are non-citizens and those who are immigrants. But David, what's the 411 on what your rights are to due process? What is that?
So it means you have a right to your day in court.
Okay.
And so the concern has been that some people get swept up and removed without having their day in court. So you could pick up somebody who isn't who you think it is, or who actually has the correct documentation, or it could even be a U.S. citizen.
That's right.
And if they don't get their chance to present their case to a court, they're just removed. And we saw that problem with who may very well be a criminal, but the person who was removed to Venezuela.
Right, to El Salvador.
El Salvador.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly, El Salvador. And
Abrego.
That's right.
That's right.
And so they didn't give him a day in court. Now, they brought him back, and he'll get his day in court, and it may very well be that he is then removed after he is convicted or whatever the outcome of that case is. The problem would have been he didn't have that day in court, and once they removed him, they were claiming that it was difficult or couldn't bring him back until they finally did. And it's really, for me, about following the rules and about making sure people have their due process rights protected, and about following court orders.
So what exactly are someone's rights? You're detained. You have to tell them your name. Are you here illegally, or what do you have to answer to them? Show me your card. Do you say, no, thank you, I need to speak to a lawyer before I do anything? What is the legal process? What is someone's rights when they come in and they are not yet our legal resident, legal status? They're immigrants right now. What should they do?
A person who is in the United States undocumented should only give their name.
Period.
And it should be their true and lawful name. I advise people all the time, never give a false name. A lot of people who are traveling with these guides, we call them coyotes,
yes.
Say, well, use a different name. Don't use your name, because then they're not going to know who you are. Don't do that. Always use your true name that was given to you at birth. It is immigration's burden of proof to prove that the person is not a United States citizen. So the moment the immigrant says, I'm from El Salvador, I'm from Brazil, they've now done immigration's job. And my advice has always been, speak your name and then claim your Fifth Amendment right to be silent. The issue with that is the person going to be detained? Because ICE does have the right to investigate. And under the law, they can detain someone up to 72 hours for them to determine who the person is. But if they can't determine who the person is, they must release. Under this administration, things have been foggy in that sense. I don't think they're following those rules. And, one of the things I've gone out and done Know Your Rights throughout the state of Rhode Island. And one of the things we used to say to people is always ask for a warrant. If you're on the street and you're going to be detained, and do you have a warrant to arrest me? Because they have the Fourth Amendment right to search and seizure. You must have a warrant for you to arrest me. And I'm sure people have seen the videos of ICE officers, cracking down windows and pulling people out of cars. I think that's a complete violation of due process of their, Fourth Amendment right to search and seizure, when number one, the officers most times don't even provide an identification.
Right.
So you don't even know if that person is, a vigilante, or is that person really an ICE officer with duties and rights to arrest that person.
So help those who are here. They're going through the process. It's not finished. We'll talk about green cards and the rest in a moment. But do you have some guidance, either both, about what someone should do when they're here? So I've heard things, let me just toss this out, that you should know or have a lawyer. You should have some sort of documentation or safety plan where if you have kids in the school system and someone snatches you, you need to take care of those children. What are the things that we should do? And also, if you would, one of you please address, apparently, as we have in the country now, there's fraud going on. And as if people who are going through the system don't have enough issues, now there are people who are trying to scam them on top. Please help us with those things.
Let me start with this part.
Yes.
They should absolutely have a lawyer, because I don't believe they're being told that they have due process rights when they're picked up.
Right.
So if someone's picked up and a family member can contact a lawyer, the lawyer can at least initiate what they have to do to get them a hearing or a day in court.
That's right.
So that's first and foremost, a lawyer. Secondly, what was that you asked about?
Documents?
Preparedness.
Yeah.
Being prepared.
Yeah. So that
Kids or whatever.
I mean, what immigration advocates have been telling people is, if you already have a deportation order, prepare yourself, prepare your family, prepare your children. I can only imagine how difficult that conversation must be. Like, as a mother, as a daughter, as a sister, as a wife, I don't know what that would look like. And I can't even begin to say how hard it must be to have the conversation of, with your children, maybe mommy and daddy aren't going to be home, and maybe auntie so-and-so is going to pick you up. Going to the schools, making sure that that third person has the authority to pick up the person. A lot of people don't have family in Rhode Island or in the state that they live in. Make sure that the person that you are selecting does not have a criminal record, right? Sometimes people are desperate. They say, oh, my neighbor, Joe Schmo, he's a US citizen. Maybe he's got a drug problem. Maybe he's got a drinking problem. Look into the person a little bit. Ask neighbors, do you know so-and-so? How are they? Never tell people about your status, though, by the way. Never tell anybody what your status is.
Never tell the school. Never tell anyone.
Because there are some schools that are very protective of their families and won't do anything, but then there are others that don't. I think you need to know the community that you're in. Parents should prepare powers of attorney for their children in case someone needs to pick up the child. Parents need to prepare medical powers of attorney for that person to be able to take the child to a doctor if that became necessary. People should prepare general powers of attorney if they own a home, if they have a car, if they have a bank account. Who's going to have access to that? Preparing children's documents. A lot of parents who have young kids who never travel abroad may not be thinking, oh, wait, I got to get my child's passport,
right,
or get a birth certificate, or maybe I need my divorce decree, or all of these certificates, and all of that needs to be in one place.
With permission to travel for the passport.
Absolutely.
So I read something recently about how the most recent 2 years matters. You should collect your telephone bill or your utility bill or whatever else, something that's showing your...
So that's related to the arriving alien that I spoke about earlier.
That's the arriving, okay.
Right, so arriving aliens who have been inside of the United States for less than 2 years are subject to what's called expedited removal. Expedited removal, there is no due process. I guess I'll say it that way, because the person does not have their day in court, right? They don't have the right to a lawyer. They don't have their day in court. They don't have the right to argue anything. And it's really one officer who is at the border who says, I have decided that you, sir, are going to be deported because I don't believe anything that you're saying. And so they just deport the person. There is no record of that. There is no appeal. Attorneys cannot file FOIA requests for that information as it relates. I generally have to do an FBI check to see if there was ever an expedited removal order at some point, because clients don't usually know that. Because what happens is that they're at the border, CBP picks them up, clients will say, well, I don't know, I was there for 3 hours. They took my fingerprints and then sent me back.
Is that similar to the idea of the airport being a border?
That's right.
And they can just turn you away?
That's absolutely right, because anybody who appears at an airport who does not have proper documents is going to be considered an arriving alien, and they can be deported immediately and just sent back, not even allowed admission.
Let's talk about people who have the thing that's called a green card. you came here, however you petitioned, do people go to you, for example, to get a green card? How do people get a green card? And I understand there's some changes in that might be favoring people who come here with the EB, the employment-based visa. What can you share about that?
So there are 3 ways in which people can get their green cards, and aside from humanitarian ones. So there are humanitarian ones like Asylum, U visa, VOW. I want to put those aside for a moment. There's family-based, there's employment-based, and then there's a diversity lottery.
What is that?
So the diversity lottery is a lottery that the United States government has allowed countries where we don't see a lot of immigrants come from. And so they'll have a lottery wherein the immigrant goes to the American embassy in their country and they apply for the lottery. If they are given the lottery, then they're allowed to come to the United States and get their green card at the embassy, but then come to the United States with a green card. That's the diversity lottery. It's probably one of the, I don't want to say easiest because it's a lottery after all, but probably one of the better ways where you don't need anybody to sponsor you. Family-based petitions are petitions that of family members. So parents or spouses or children who are United States citizens can petition. A lawful permanent resident parent can petition for a child. A lawful permanent resident spouse can petition for a spouse. A United States citizen can petition for a brother. But back in the 60s, aunts and uncles used to be able to petition. That's no longer a case. So aunts and uncles and grandparents can't petition for grandkids and that sort of thing. It is very limited, and there's a quota. So there's only 480,000 visas per year that are given in all the categories. So employment-based and family-based and diversity. Employment-based is a little more complicated. So, of course, this person who's in the White House has decided that he is going to give what he's called a golden ticket to people who have $5 million who will pay $5 million for the golden ticket. I have gotten a call on it. There are no regulations on it. I'm not even sure that it's really a thing. I suppose if he stays in office long enough, maybe it'll become a thing, or maybe it's just a bad joke. First preference employment-based visas are for people with outstanding abilities. So think about a cancer researcher. Think about a Brad Pitt of the world. And so
a doctor who does
transplants. Second preference would be people who do national importance work. And then third and fourth preference are for other sorts of visas. They're not the easiest thing to get. And so those are the various ways in which someone could get their green card.
I know we don't have a lot of time left, but a quick question. So a doctor who has a visa comes to the border, returning, and gets sent back. Is that...
So speaking of the doctor we all know, that doctor only had what's called a non-immigrant visa that can be revoked at any time.
Yep.
Her visa was revoked even before she had come into the United States or tried to.
Got it.
And I understand that it takes time to get those work permits when people want to do that.
Very long time, very expensive.
We hope that this has been helpful to you. There's certainly so much to discuss relative to immigration. We thank you for tuning into The Law Matters. As we say, it matters to you. Thank you.